What can we learn from the security delegation of the African Peace Mission? I'm Dr. K. I'm a political scientist who looks at how information is shared, and the story of President Ramaphosa's security detail getting stuck in Warsaw, Poland, with about a dozen journalists is an example of how events can be framed differently. Made up of the heads of states and officials from Zambia, the Republic of Congo, Egypt, Senegal, and Uganda, the mission was led by South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa, and the main group traveled first to Kyiv and then on to St. Petersburg between June 16th and 18th. But the largest part of the delegation, around 120 people that were traveling on a separate chartered plane, never even got to the two main destinations. Framing refers to how information is packaged and presented. By highlighting certain events within a particular context, certain interpretations can be encouraged or discouraged. When it comes to framing, think about personal perspective. Like on June 16th, when President Ramaphosa's head of security, Major General Wally Ruda, accused the Polish government of racism. He said they're delaying us and putting the life of our president in jeopardy. And I want you guys to see how racist they are.
Oh, racist they are.
He said this after the security detail and journalists meant to accompany the African Peace Mission seemed to be stuck in their chartered plane at Warsaw Airport. His words selected and emphasized certain aspects of the situation, while downplaying and omitting others, and his version of the events were the first reported on. Yet, as the hours ticked by, more and more reports flooded social media. Journalists on the plane were posting what they saw and heard, making it easy to follow the developments on Twitter. Both the head of security and South African journalists were using social media and TV as communication channels. The Warsaw Airport and Polish officials have more formal communication channels and considerations, and they initially only released vague details about the plane's passenger lists being incorrect and copies of official documents not being accepted as the reason behind the problems. Thin reasoning to put a president's life in danger. The framing from individuals soon became a narrative that the Polish government was working against the African-led peace mission, and specifically against South Africa. Poland, after all, is a partner and ally of Ukraine. And on social media, we were reminded that South Africa has remained neutral in the war, has abstained from voting on UN resolutions against Russia's war in Ukraine, and that South Africa was considered by the West one of Moscow's closest allies in Africa. Narrative making is what happens when situations are reinterpreted in the context of one's own life. Narrative acceptance is tied to confirmation bias. People are more likely to accept narratives that they recognize. South Africa has had a difficult history with colonial Europe, and a Polish South African right-wing extremist was convicted of the 1993 assassination of Chris Hani. He was the General Secretary of the South African Communist Party. Facts that support ideas that came from one TikToker, for example, that Poland was showing the same kind of colonial thinking that Europe had for centuries. First, hours later, Polish officials responded, saying that racism was not a factor in its decision to refuse entry to South Africa's presidential guard and media. An airport spokesman told the BBC that South African security guards did not have the necessary permits for their weapons, saying they can't let passengers with illegal firearms into the EU. The airport official went on to say that all passengers could have left the plane if they'd left their weapons on it, but they refused. That's when it became clear that the security detail also had 12 containers of weapons on the plane, a fact that was reported by a South African journalist, Amanda Koza, from the plane. She also reported the possibility that containers with the weapons might have been the reason that Italy did not want to let the charter flight enter its airspace on the way to Warsaw. Zambia's president had about 12 security officers along. The Comoros president had 2 security officers. Senegal's president is thought to have also had about 12 security guards along. These leaders were able to travel with their guards to Kyiv and St. Petersburg. The South African delegation, according to a South African news report, numbered about 120, and the weapons on the plane included heavy firearms fit for combat, not just personal protection. Usually, when delegations travel to Ukraine, they fly to Warsaw or straight to Rzeszów in eastern Ukraine. Then they drive or take a train to the Ukrainian border. That's about 85 kilometers. And the Poles weren't willing to allow the weapons out. The Polish Foreign Ministry described the situation as a failure to comply with standard entry procedures. Going on with dangerous goods were on board the plane, with South African representatives did not have permission to bring in. After more than 26 hours, those on the plane got off without their baggage, and the decision was made to send the delegation home. Workarounds were looked for to get them at least to St. Petersburg, and South African journalists seemed confused about the proposed flight paths, maybe not aware that Russia banned foreign airlines from its airspace in retaliation to its own carriers being banned from foreign airspace as a result of the war. Was the grounding of President Ramaphosa's security team a racist reaction, a plot to sabotage the peace mission, or was it way too many people and weapons that were along for the ride and the rule of law in Poland wouldn't allow for exceptions? All of these narratives are being shared, underscored by the individual framing of people involved. There is more than likely more to this story than we may ever know. But what should you be watching for? You should keep an eye on the next state visits from Europe or the US, and especially Poland to South Africa. Diplomatic reciprocity is kind of like karma. Countries treat each other how they're treated. Finland and Portugal were recently there. That went fine. Let's see how other European countries are treated now when they fly into South Africa with large delegations.